is edited, but a lot of it is edited because of pronunciations of words that yours truly, unfortunately, can't pronounce. And then we kind of shorten it just a little bit. But throughout this letter, we're going to also make comments. So sit back. It's kind of a long one. Relax and enjoy. And then you can make comments later. And Anthony will tell you how you can get in contact with us and let us know what you thought about this letter. But this is a real letter. We have it here from Bill Ackman. And he wrote this letter to the president of Harvard University. And this is to President Gay. Dear President Gay, I am writing this letter to you regretfully. Never did I think I would have to write a letter to the president of my alma mater about the impact of her actions and inactions on the health and safety of the student body in order to help capitalize necessary change. For the past 4 weeks since the horrors of October 7th, I have been in dialogue with members of the corporation board, other alumni, as well as students and faculty sharing and comparing our concerns about the growing number of anti-Semitic incidents on campus. So, as we wait for you and the university to act. 4 weeks after the barbaric terrorist attacks of October 7th, I have lost confidence that you and the university will do what is required. So because he went there, he wrote this letter. So let's go on. Last Wednesday, I spent several hours on campus meeting with Jewish, Israel, and non-Jewish students and faculty at the law school, at HBS, and in a 90-minute town hall in Aldrich, 112, with 230 Jewish college students. Coincidentally, one for each hostage held by Hamas, research staff, and faculty from the university at large, organized by Harvard Chabad. Now, over the course of the day, it became clear that the situation at Harvard is dire and getting worse, much worse than I had realized. And I think much worse than the country realized and even the world. Jewish students are being bullied, physically intimidated, spat on, and in several widely disseminated videos of one such incident, physically assaulted. Students lack message boards are repent with anti-Semitic statements, memes, and images. On-campus protesters on the Widener Library steps and elsewhere shout, Infidel, 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 from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. As they normally call for violent insurrection and use voluminous language seeking the destruction of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. When you explained in your October 12th video address that Harvard embraces a commitment to free expression, you sent a clear message that the voluminous and anti-Semitic statements of the protesters are permissible on campus. My own personal side note, some people thought that, some people didn't. It's all in the eyes of the beholder. Putting aside the legal limitations on free speech that include restrictions on fighting words and true threats, where speakers direct a threat to a person or group of persons with the intent of placing a victim in fear of bodily harm or death. If Harvard indeed had a strong track record of protecting free speech, many would have taken your support for free speech more seriously. Unfortunately, Harvard has not embraced a serious commitment to free speech, particularly so in recent years. This part is interesting in this letter. In the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expressions, Harvard has consistently finished in the bottom in each of the past 4 years, with its ranking deteriorating each year. On September 23rd, just 2 weeks prior to October 7th, Fire announced that Harvard achieved its lowest free speech ranking ever for the 2023 academic year, ranking last out of 254 universities, with a ranking of 0.00, the only university with an abysmal speech climate. So when they're talking about free speech, and they're saying they're forced free speech, they're at the bottom of that. Something to think about. So now the results of the survey where Fire cites multiple examples of incidents on the Harvard campus where students and faculty were denied their First Amendment rights. Therefore, when you cite Harvard's commitment to free expression in supporting the protesters, it rings false and hypocritical to the university at large and the Jewish community in particular. And if that's true, then he's right. Many Jewish students have also recently become afraid to express their concerns. Many have also felt the need to remove their Stars of David and other overt evidence of their religion and heritage on campus and in Cambridge to avoid being exposed to discrimination and bullying or worse. So think about that. You're going to college and you're trying to learn, and you have to take stuff off as far as who you are because you're scared that somebody's going to attack you or make fun of you. And you're going to Harvard. Wow. What if that happened to your university? What would you do? Back to the letter. I am incredibly saddened to say that Harvard has also become a place where Jewish students are concerned about the threat of physical violence, which likely has a corresponding impact on your mental health. Wow. Among other insults, they're forced to sit next to classmates who openly and comfortably post under their actual names anti-Semitic statements and imagery on the student-wide Slack message system with no consequences for their action. So people feel, this is me now, that you can do all this, make fun of people, and then sit back and relax and think there's no consequences. Think about this, not just for Jewish people, but any racial nationality. Put it in your head as I continue to read this. Now back to this letter. And it is not just the Jewish students and faculty that are up in arms. While on campus, I heard a constant refrain from non-Jewish members of the Harvard community. Why are Claudia and administration doing nothing about this? This is what he says. Harvard's Office of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging. I have heard from many members of the Harvard community that Harvard's Office of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging is an important contributing factor to the problem. I was surprised to learn from students and faculty that the OEDIB does not support Jewish, Asian, and non-LGBTQIA white students. I had never read the statement until today when I wrote this letter. Wow. The statement makes clear that Harvard's conception of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging does not include Jews, at least those that are not in one of the other welcome DEI groups. But think about that. This equity group isn't supporting people that they should be supporting. So he continues, according to Harvard's DEI statement, we actively seek and welcome people of color, women, persons with disabilities, people who identify as LGBTQIA, and those who are at the intersections of these identities from across the spectrum of disciplines and methods to join us. My commentary seems kind of hypocritical. Back to his letter. In other words, Jews and others who are not on the above list are not welcome to join. When anti-Semitism is widely prevalent on campus, and the DEI office, which views diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging as a pathway to achieving inclusive excellence and fostering a campus culture where everyone can thrive, does not welcome Jewish students, we have a serious problem. It is abundantly clear that the campus culture that is being fostered at Harvard today is not one where everyone is included, feels a sense of belonging, welcomes diversity, or is a place where everyone can thrive. And this is Mr. Ackman's film. Equity on campus. The issue of equity, or the lack thereof, was another issue about which I heard constant complaints, i.e., the so-called double standard. One member of the faculty asked, and think about this, what would Claudia do if 34 Harvard student organizations put out a statement on May 25th, 2020, that George Floyd had it coming, noting that you have yet to condemn the student organization letter which holds Israel solely responsible for the heinous and barbaric acts of a terrorist organization. Again, what if Harvard put out a statement? George Floyd had it coming from student organizations. What would people do then? Would they be up in arms? Something to think about. Back to his letter. Other faculty, alumni, and students asked other rhetorical questions, including, how would Harvard respond if a trans student attempted to walk by an anti-LGBTQIA demonstration on the HBA campus and was subject to the same abuse that the Jewish HBC student experienced at the Free Palestine demonstration on October 18th? When you think about it personally, how does it affect you? He continues, how would you respond to a Harvard white supremacist protest where students shouted, Tulsa, 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 from the Atlantic to the Pacific? America should be free of Black people. How would you feel? And ironically, this wasn't too far from happening not too long ago. Back to his letter. Would Harvard even permit the above demonstrations to take place on campus? My comment, what is free speech? Some people say free speech is the right to say whatever you want to say. And that's the difference between our country and other countries. Free speech. If I don't like you, I can say that. But can I threaten you? That's kind of what we're talking about. If you say something and it threatens somebody's well-being, where they're uncomfortable, where they have mental health issues, and you're just saying it by words, is that giving you the right to have free speech? Something to think about. I will continue. Despite the outbursts of anti-Semitic activities and protests on campus, the first initiative that Harvard took to protect students was the establishment on October 24th of a task force to support students experiencing doxing, harassment, and online security issues following backlash against students allegedly affiliated with a statement that had Israel entirely responsible for violence in the Israel-Hamas conflict. The creation of this task force sent a very strong message that the university was not just ignoring the anti-Semitic incidents and threats to Jewish student safety on campus, but rather it was taking sides in the conflict by only supporting students who had Israel responsible for Hamas's vile acts. And you think about this, when you do these task forces, you kind of already know. If somebody's hitting somebody, somebody's calling somebody's name, and intimidating them, instead of doing a task force of, let's see why they're doing that and what we can do, you don't need to do a task force. Just stop it from taking place. Back to the letter. In summary, your failure, and I'm letting you know this isn't the end, do that aloud. But he says, in summary, your failure to condemn the barbaric acts of October 7th opened the door for a wave of anti-Israel attacks on campus that have led to a growing number of anti-Semitic protests and actions. Because the campus didn't do anything soon enough, is it their fault that the kids there did the things that they did? You decide. Some people say yes, they should have stopped this and nipped in the bud before it got carried over. And some people said, well, it's not for us to get involved. Your subsequent two statements about October 7th to the university attempting to address the failures of your first letter were not taken seriously, as many perceived those statements as being driven by pressure from the alumni community, rather than reflecting a sincere and authentic understanding of the issues and real empathy for Israel and the Jewish community. The failure of your communications to the public and the university, coupled with the fact that the first tangible action by the university was to protect those who blame Israel, has created a belief among the Jewish and Israel community at Harvard that they are not deemed welcome nor worthy of protection by the university. And unfortunately, did they ignore people's cries for help? Narrowcasting. Finally, your announcement on Friday, October 27th about launching a task force to address anti-Semitism and your statement that anti-Semitism has no place at Harvard was welcomed by members of the Jewish community in attendance. But students who participated in my Thursday town hall were either unaware of that announcement or alternately questioned your commitment to address anti-Semitism. So you guys put out that announcement, but didn't tell enough people. At my town hall, he says, it was noted that your anti-Semitism speech was made only to Jewish students and parents at a Hifo Shabbat dinner, and a transcript of your remarks was only given to and published in the Forward, a niche Jewish publication with a tiny subscriber base. So you're putting it out there, but you're not really putting it out there that this is how we're addressing people at our school. So two members of the Harvard faculty described this as narrowcasting to an affinity group rather than you making a serious public commitment to address anti-Semitism. One research fellow stated, and many in the room agreed, that they would only believe that you were committed to stamp out anti-Semitism at Harvard if you stood up in front of the entire Harvard community and made that commitment, and you did implement tangible and decisive actions consistent with that commitment. And that's what happened kind of with Dr. Gay at the congressional hearing. You have an open area to talk, and yet you were trying to toe both sides, which made you look even worse. Hence this letter. While the members of the Jewish community I met with at Harvard were happy to hear from an alumni who was willing to listen, many students questioned why you have not sat down with students so that you can hear their concerns firsthand. Something simple. Some of these are simple questions. You may not like the guy who wrote it, but these are simple questions in this letter and some simple solutions. Anti-Semitism at Harvard prior to October 7th in the transcript of your speech published in the Forward, you said about anti-Semitism at Harvard, for years, this university has done too little to confront its continuing presence. No longer. Your remarks imply that anti-Semitism has been a serious issue at Harvard that has gone unaddressed for years. I have been an active alumni for 35 years, having attended the college and HBS, taught numerous classes on campus each year, have participated in many fireside chats with large student audiences, mentored current students and recent graduates on a regular basis, and have been a member of the Dean's Advisory Board at the business school for many years. During this period, I have neither experienced nor have I become aware of any anti-Semitism incidents at Harvard until beginning 4 weeks ago. So that part is interesting. If there hadn't been the war that took place, would anybody have known about this? Maybe it was, underscored. Maybe people knew about it but didn't talk about it. So in a weird way, with the war happening, now people are talking about it because I don't think it just pops up. Because it pops up. Anything in life, it's always underground. And then when something happens, it just starts building up. So I think it started building up. What do you think? Back to his letter. When I asked my daughter today about her experience with anti-Semitism at Harvard, she graduated in 2020. She described anti-Semitism when she was at Harvard as non-existent. While I am sure it is possible, if not likely, that there have been some anti-Semitic incidents at Harvard over the last 35 years, the reality is that Harvard has been extremely comfortable. It has been an extremely comfortable place to be Jewish and or Israel up until the last 4 weeks. Wow, so over the 35 years that he has been involved with the school, he has literally experienced nothing. So did this bring everything up to what it is today? In truth, he says, the outburst at anti-Semitism at Harvard is a recent one and is largely due to your actions and inactions and that of the administration and the university at large in failing to appropriately address blatant anti-Semitism on campus. So now, in the letter, he talks about how can you solve the problem. And some of these aren't that hard. What I find particularly upsetting about recent events on campus is that the problem is not so difficult to address. I do not believe that anti-Semitism is widespread among the student body and faculty at Harvard. Rather, I believe that a small minority of students, faculty, and staff are anti-Semitic, and the administration is interactive in confronting the problem head-on, have emboldened this anti-Semitic student or subset of the community to escalate their anti-Semitic actions because there have been no consequences for doing so. So it's like You have a small group of people that don't like things, and they have their own small group. And something happens across the world or anywhere, and the small group of people says, you know what? We agree with them, and we're going to speak out. Almost kind of like, let's say, whether you're Democrat, Republican, let's say, take Donald Trump for example. People voted him in. A lot of people didn't want him in. But he was able to reach that group of people that wanted him in. Maybe there were people like that before, and they just didn't know how to get out there. But once they saw somebody who said, hey, this is what we can do to make America great again, then they said, hey, you know what? Here's somebody that we believe in. Let's get out and get out there and vote for him. So as soon as he got in office, you saw more of the people like him. Now, people were wondering, well, where were they at in the Obama years? Maybe they were just in their little cubbyhole and they couldn't find a way to get out there. But when Donald Trump came, they saw, hey, you know what? We can get out of our cubbyhole and we can be out there and support this guy. So with the and it's interesting when we use the word anti-Semitism. With people involved with that, maybe they were out there already at Harvard in their own little pocket group. And once everything happened with the war, they decided to come out. Actions speak much louder than words, it says. Members of the Harvard community have heard such words, but experienced no action or substance to address anti-Semitism on campus. I would therefore recommend the following steps, which I believe would drastically reduce, if not eliminate, anti-Semitic acts at Harvard immediately. So I'm about to read what he says will stop that. So hopefully if it doesn't just stop Harvard, it'll stop the world. But here he goes. First, the student involved in harassing and allegedly physically assaulting the HBS student on October 18th should be immediately suspended. Done. I understand that the university is waiting for the outcome of the police department review of the situation to take action, but this makes no sense. It is clear from the multiple videos available of the incident that the conduct of the protesters involved does not meet the standards for student conduct outlined in the Harvard College Student Handbook. You think in that book it would say, hey, don't harass people? In particular, Harvard's anti-bullying policies outlined in the report and recommendations from the anti-bullying working group adopted on September 1st, 2023. And I bet you if you do look in that book, it'll say something about don't bully or harass people. So Harvard student disciplinary actions should not be outsourced to the police department. And he's pretty much saying, don't wait for the police. This is your school. Put that person on hold and let the police investigate. Taking decisive action now would put all Harvard students, faculty, and staff on notice that the university takes violations of Harvard's code of conduct seriously and will bring great comfort to the Jewish community at Harvard that appropriate actions to reduce threats to their safety are being implemented. Okay, that's not a bad deal. Second, the protesters who have been chanting other eliminative statements should be subject to disciplinary actions. It's all about the words. There are multiple videos available of the various protests that would enable the university to identify the individuals involved, who can then be referred to the administrative board, where appropriate disciplinary action can be determined and acted upon. All right, that's not a bad one. Third, the university should review the student Slack message boards to identify those students who have made anti-Semitic statements or share anti-Semitic imagery. These students should also be referred to the administrative board for appropriate disciplinary action. And you would think some of this stuff was taking place, but he's writing this letter, so maybe it hasn't. Fourth, the university should publicly reach out to students in an effort to obtain other examples of anti-Semitic acts that should also be carefully investigated and for which appropriate disciplinary steps should be taken. So now you're telling people on the campus to, hey, come to us if you've seen or heard this. Some people might want to, other people might be scared. Because Harvard students are notoriously focused on their job and career prospects post-graduation, disciplinary actions by the administration for failure to meet the university standards for appropriate conduct that become part of a student's permanent record should serve as an effective deterrent to evoke anti-Semitic acts on campus. So pretty much, if you do this, we're going to put this on your permanent record. And some people care, some people do, some people don't. No law firm, corporation, or graduate program will hire or admit an anti-Semitic or racist student. I know that the recent letter to the deans of law schools across the country, signed by many of the top law firms in the U.S., has, I am told, already begun to have an effect in reducing anti-Semitic acts at the law school. And yes, if you know people that were involved in name calling and threats, would you want to, as a employer, hire somebody at Harvard who just went to Harvard, did what they had to do, or went to Harvard, threatening, bullying people, and it's on their permanent record? So with day and age of video today, when people say they can't solve things, literally everybody has a video capture of something. So people should think before they act if they're doing something now, because it may affect their future later. So fifth, the university should form a task force to review the appropriateness of the activities of the OEDIB and whether its practice of excluding certain minority communities on campus, including Asian and Jewish students, as appropriate, which in fact may be contributing to discrimination against these groups on campus. And my thing is this just happening? Really? Six, the results of the anti-Semitic task force should be made public as promptly as possible so that we can better understand the sources of anti-Semitism. At Harvard, Harvard's admission practices should be reassessed to ascertain why the university is admitting racist students and should consider revisions to the application process to enable the university to better screen the character of candidates for admission. So all these are a lot of does. They should consider revisions to the application process to ascertain why the university is admitting racist students. Now, really, do you know at the time you're admitting somebody that they're a racist student? How do you know what situations come out where you find out that they're racist? The situation with Hamas? Makes it seem like it. Seventh, as Harvard president, you should make clear that Harvard supports free speech on campus, but that certain kinds of hate speech, as well as fighting words and incitement of violence, are not consistent with Harvard's values or considered appropriate conduct for members of the Harvard community. Well, yeah, I mean, you can have free speech, but you can't be name calling, getting in people's face and threatening them. That's not even in a handbook that should be there. That's just common sense. In connection with your commitment to free speech, Harvard should form a task force to understand the constraints on free speech at Harvard that have led to it ranking last on FIRE's annual college survey, so the issues that have led to Harvard's last place ranking can be addressed. Yeah, because if you're a Harvard and you're an advocate for free speech, but yet you're listed last as far as being an advocate on free speech, then maybe you haven't read the rankings. Something to think about. Violations of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. On September 28th, 2023, the Biden administration issued a clarifying release stating that Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits certain forms of anti-Semitism and related discrimination as part of its national strategy to counter anti-Semitism, released in May 2023. That's something for anybody to look up. Maybe we'll do a story about that too. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act requires universities, listen to this, to provide all students, including students who are or are perceived to be Jewish, a school environment free from discrimination. Wow. The consequences for a university's failure to meet the requirements of the Title VI include the cancellation of federal funding. I'm going to read this again. Here's the clear point. pretty much of this letter. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act requires universities to provide all students, including students who are or are perceived to be Jewish, a school environment free from discrimination. Is Harvard doing that? Is a college that you're at possibly doing that? The consequences for a university's failure to meet the requirements of Title VI include cancellation of federal funding. So should Harvard have their federal funding taken away? To me, it's one of the greatest parts of this letter. Harvard has failed in recent weeks to meet its Title VI obligations, which threatens a major source of the university's funding. When coupled with numerous Jewish and non-Jewish alumni that have publicly and privately shared these same concerns, important sources of Harvard's revenues are at risk. While the university should not need a financial incentive to eliminate discrimination on campus, Harvard's recent failure to create a safe and non-discriminatory environment for Jewish students threatens the university's funding for research, scholarships, and more. And so, President Gay, if you don't know exactly what you guys are doing by not acknowledging, man, that there's some type of discrimination taking place at Harvard, then that financial resources should be yanked immediately. That's just my opinion. Back to his letter. Your historic opportunity. You have been president of Harvard, one of the most important institutions in the world, for 4 months at one of the most challenging times in its history. As Harvard's leader, your words and actions are followed closely. As a result, the steps you take to address anti-Semitism at while Harvard will be recognized around the world and can contribute greatly as an example to other institutions seeking to eliminate anti-Semitism in all of its forms. History has taught us that when the sparks of initial flames of anti-Semitism emerge, we must promptly put out the flames before a configuration begins. It is therefore critically important that you act with alacrity, sorry about that, in addressing these issues. I encourage you to act boldly and promptly to eliminate the scourge at Harvard. And I like this part right here. When the sparks and initial flames emerge, we must promptly put out the flames before a configuration begins. And this is what they were saying, talking about anti-Semitism. And as we're about to close this letter, I told you it was a long letter, but it's had to be read. He says, I also call upon you to complete the commitment you made at inauguration when you stated that knowledge is our purpose. We serve that purpose best when we commit to open inquiry and freedom of expression as foundational values of the academic community. Harvard must create an environment where free speech is encouraged and accepted. At the same time, the Harvard community at large must understand the difference between speech protected by the First Amendment and speech that incites violence or seeks the elimination of any group. Such speech does not advance knowledge, nor does it belong on campus, regardless of whether or not it is protected by the First Amendment. Successfully addressing anti-Semitism at Harvard and creating an environment where true freedom of expression will become a critically important part of your legacy as the Harvard community works together to address these challenges at a difficult time in world history. And this is a difficult time. I would be delighted to help in any way that I can to enable you to succeed in this message. And as Harvard's president, please let me know what more I can do to help. Sincerely, William A. Ackman. And this was on November 4th, 2023. So wow, you know what? When I originally was gonna do this and reading this letter, it was gonna be long. And thank you, Anthony, too, for letting me do this. I told you it's gonna be a long letter. I just thought it was just a guy that's got a lot of money who just wanted to give his input because he was alumni, he put money into the college and everything. But then as I read this letter more and broke it apart, You just take him and his money out the way. And here's a person who looks at Harvard and possibly, went to Harvard, like, one of us, I didn't, and just said, I'm going to put together a letter. And think about this. What if this was a college you went to? And think of the college you went to. Maybe your kid is going to that college. You see things happen in college. Your kid comes home and says, Dad, I was harassed because of fill in the blank. Black, white, fat, skinny, tall, fill in the blank. Dad, Mom, I was harassed at my school because I was blank. Again, I was harassed at my school because I was blank. Fill in that. And you're looking at this in common sense. Why are you being harassed? And what's the school doing about it? And you know what? I'm paying money for you to go to the school, and you feel uncomfortable going to the school because you're harassed because you're blank. Well, I'm going to get in contact with this school. And maybe you get in contact with it, doesn't do nothing. But then maybe other parents get in contact with that particular school that your kid or you have gone to. And you say, well, why haven't you done anything? And the school says, well, you know what? We don't condone any of this violent act. Well, if you don't condone any violent act, whether it's saying harassing words or getting in people's face or threatening them or making them feel uncomfortable, which might cause a mental health issue because they're going to this school to become somebody and you're hurting them from becoming somebody. But you're not addressing this. And then when you do get in front of Congress, you just say, well, you know what? We're up in arms in that. And we don't like that taking place at our school. Okay, but that's not doing anything. What are the consequences? Well, we're going to put together a task force and see. I put together a task force and see. Okay, you know that there's a problem at that college campus that your kid goes to. Well, in our book, there's right here, you can't be threatening people. You can't be physically bullying. Okay, well, if they're doing that, then get them out of that college. Or let them know that this is going to go on their record, where they'll be too scared to do this at the school. And if that doesn't happen, and it's been proven to a lot of kids on campuses that a lot of the threats and stuff are still going on, well, that Title VI, and think about that. If Title VI says that there should be no discriminatory actions against certain ethnic groups, it should be all ethnic groups. And in the policies, it says if the college has been proven not to do anything, then some of their financial money that was given to that institution from the federal government should be taken away. Boy, I guess that's when colleges will wake up. And for the apology of Harvard, maybe that was pushed to them. Maybe they said, you know what, President Gay, it's looking bad. Nobody believes what you're saying. You got to straighten this out. Because if you don't, we're going to lose our money. And you're going to be fired. And so she tries to make it right because it makes you think it's all about money. Will this all be settled where there be safety at the college campuses? Because not taking care of the students, but the money. So with Bill Ackman, for Ackman, writing this letter, at first I was against it because I just thought, here's a guy, millionaire, billionaire. He just wants to put his input in here. Who are you? Okay. Well, he's a person, hopefully after hearing about this letter, that you might respect him in some ways. He's a very controversial guy, but you might respect what he did to try to open up people's eyes. And on our show, keeping it honest, keeping it real, keeping it simple, that's what we do. We try to keep it honest. What else would somebody read the entire letter to open up your eyes? So if you hadn't heard about this letter, or even if you had, now you've heard what the letter was all about. So think about this. If these colleges do not slow down the intimidation of other students, scaring other students not to even come to school and feel like they have no right to be in school, to better their future, then you're going to have to make it hard for the ones who are doing that and hurt their future by telling them these are the actions. This has to stop. And if it doesn't, you guys will pay the consequences. And by you guys, I mean the students. But if you guys do not step up and take care of the situation at these colleges, then your colleges will face the consequences. Something to think about.